In the hills west of Arkham, there are dark, mysterious valleys with ancient farms and forests that have never seen sunlight. The old folk have left, and foreigners don't dare to live there due to an unexplained, unsettling feeling. Ammi Pierce, an old man with a quirky mind, is the only one who remains and shares tales of the strange days. He lives near the open fields and roads around Arkham, which gives him the courage to speak about the past. Ammi recounts the story of the Blasted Heath, a desolate, gray area devoid of vegetation, where a family disappeared or was killed in the 1880s. The locals avoid talking about it, and Ammi's tales are often dismissed as crazy stories. However, when asked, Ammi shares the terrifying events that began with a meteorite. The narrator, a surveyor, visits the area to plan a new reservoir and is drawn into the mystery. He discovers the eerie, abandoned farms and the blasted heath, which fills him with dread. As Ammi shares his story, the narrator becomes increasingly unsettled, eventually deciding to quit his job and leave the area. The reservoir will soon be built, and the secrets of the strange days will be buried beneath the water. However, the narrator is hesitant to return to the area, especially at night, and refuses to drink the city water of Arkham. In the western woods, a strange event occurred in 1882. A white noontide cloud, a string of explosions, and a pillar of smoke appeared, followed by a great rock falling from the sky and landing in Nahum Gardner's front yard. The rock was hot, soft, and plastic-like, and it glowed faintly at night. Professors from Miskatonic University came to investigate and took a specimen to test. They found it had an unknown spectrum, was magnetic, and reacted strangely to acids. As they tested it, the rock began to shrink and eventually vanished, leaving behind a hollow spherical space. The professors returned to Nahum's farm, where they found the rock had shrunk further. They took another specimen, which also vanished after testing. The rock seemed to have an electrical property, drawing lightning during a thunderstorm, and eventually disappeared completely. The incident made Nahum a local celebrity, and he became proud of the attention his farm received. Nahum, a farmer, felt tired and old as the harvest season approached. His orchards were thriving, but the fruit was inedible due to a strange bitterness. He blamed the meteorite that had fallen earlier. As winter arrived, Nahum became worried about strange footprints in the snow, which seemed unusual to him. His family and the Gardner dogs also seemed anxious and unhealthy. Ammi, a friend, noticed that the horses shied away from Nahum's house, and the McGregor boys found a peculiar woodchuck with altered body proportions and an eerie expression. People began to whisper about the strange happenings, and the snow around Nahum's house melted faster than usual. In March, Stephen Rice saw abnormal skunk cabbages growing near Nahum's, with strange colors and monstrous shapes. The professors from the college visited Nahum, but dismissed the strange occurrences as mere country talk. As the days passed, the trees around Nahum's house budded prematurely and swayed ominously in the wind. The Gardner family developed a habit of stealthy listening, sensing something was wrong. The saxifrage flowers had a strange color, and the morning cloak butterflies behaved strangely around them. In April, the vegetation around Nahum's house grew in bizarre colors, and the road past his house was eventually abandoned. The colors reminded Ammi and the Gardners of the brittle globule in the meteor. Nahum plowed and sowed the land, hoping the summer's growths would draw the poison from the soil. He was prepared for anything, but the shunning of his house by neighbors affected his wife and sons. In May, strange insects arrived, and Nahum's place became a nightmare. The family took to watching at night, sensing something was amiss. They eventually acknowledged that Thaddeus, Nahum's son, had been right about the trees moving without wind. In a strange turn of events, a timid windmill salesman from Bolton stumbled upon a mysterious phenomenon at Nahum's farm. The darkness surrounding the farm seemed less thick, and a dim luminosity appeared to emanate from the vegetation. As time passed, the milk from the cows turned bad, and the grass and leaves began to gray and develop a brittle quality. Nahum's wife, Mrs. Gardner, descended into madness, speaking of unseen things and making eerie faces at her sons. The horses, too, became agitated and had to be put down. As the vegetation continued to wither, Nahum's sons, Thaddeus and Zena's, began to show signs of distress. Thaddeus went mad after visiting the well, speaking of moving colors, and was eventually locked away. Merwin, the youngest son, grew increasingly imaginative and restless. The livestock, too, began to fall ill, with poultry and hogs dying under inexplicable circumstances. The cows also succumbed to a mysterious disease, their bodies shriveling and disintegrating. In the end, Thaddeus died in his attic room, his death as inexplicable as the afflictions that had plagued the farm. Nahum, grief-stricken and helpless, buried his son in the family plot. Amy, the only visitor to the farm, tried to console Nahum, but the atmosphere of terror and dread hung heavy over the Gardners and their farm. In the Gardners' farm, strange events unfolded. Merwin's screams echoed from the attic, and Nahum's wife grew weaker. Amy, a friend, visited them but couldn't stay long due to the eerie atmosphere. One day, Nahum rushed to Amy's kitchen, frantic about his son Merwin, who had vanished while fetching water. A crushed lantern and pail were found near the well, but no sign of Merwin. Nahum was on the brink of madness, and Amy couldn't help but wonder what was happening. Days passed, and Amy visited the Gardner's farm again. The farm was in disarray, and Nahum lay weak on a couch. Zenas, Nahum's son, was missing, and Nahum muttered that he lived in the well. Amy searched the attic, finding the mad wife, Nabby, but also a dark, moving horror that defied explanation. He fled, locking the door behind him. As he descended the stairs, he heard strange noises, including a heavy dragging sound and an unclean suction noise. His horse, Hero, escaped in a frenzy, and Amy realized that something had happened at the well. The old house glowed with an eerie phosphorescence, and Amy steeled himself to face what was coming for him. He found Nahum's wife, but she was no longer human. Amy visited Nahum's farm, where he found Nahum's body in a state of rapid decay. Nahum's last words revealed that a mysterious entity, which lived in the well, was responsible for the death of his family and livestock. The entity, described as a color that burns and sucks the life out, was connected to a strange stone and a round object dug up by college men. Nahum believed the entity came from a place where things aren't as they are here. Amy fled the farm, fearing for his life, and notified the authorities in Arkham. The authorities, including the coroner, medical examiner, and veterinary, accompanied Amy back to the farm, where they found the bodies of Nahum and Nabby. They also discovered that Merwin and Zenas had disappeared. Upon searching the well, they found the remains of Merwin, Zenas, a deer, and a dog, along with a strange, porous, and bubbling ooze at the bottom. As night fell, a glow of the same color Nahum described was seen emanating from the well, filling Amy with dread. Amy's mind was racing as he tried to make sense of the strange occurrences at Nahum's farm. A mysterious beam of light was emanating from the well, and Amy suspected it was connected to the meteor stone that had fallen a year ago. Nahum had warned him about the creature that lived in the well, which sucked the life out of living things and grew stronger over time. As the light grew brighter, the horses outside became frantic, and Amy restrained the driver from going outside. Suddenly, the trees in the yard began to move, their branches twitching and clawing at the moonlit clouds. A cloud of darker depth passed over the moon, and the silhouette of the branches faded out. When it returned, the watchers saw 1,000 tiny points of faint, unhallowed radiance tipping each bough. The light from the well was getting brighter, pouring into the sky and infecting everything organic around it. The men were paralyzed with fear, unable to venture forth as the light spread to the wooden sheds and beehives. Even the horses broke free and ran off with the Democrat wagon. As the light continued to grow, Amy realized that it was spreading to everything that had been around the farm. He knew it had come from the meteor stone and had grown down into the well, feeding on the life force of Nahum and his family. As the column of unknown color flared stronger, Amy's horse let out a blood-curdling scream before collapsing inert on the ground. The men knew they had to leave the house, and Amy showed them the back door and the path to the 10-acre pasture. They stumbled away, not daring to look back until they were far away from the accursed farm. In the dark of night, a group of men, including Amy, approached the Gardner farm, where a strange, glowing phenomenon had occurred. The farm was aglow with an otherworldly color, and the trees and buildings seemed to be straining towards the sky. Suddenly, a hideous, shapeless horror shot up into the air, leaving behind a trail of sparks and colored fragments. The men were left stunned and frightened. As they made their way back to Arkham, Amy couldn't shake off the feeling of dread. He had seen something that the others hadn't, a faint, unearthly color rising from the well where the horror had originated. The color was not of this earth, and Amy knew that it still lurked in the well. The next morning, 3 of the men returned to the farm, but they found nothing but a desolate, gray wasteland. The only remnants of the farm were the chimney bricks, cellar stones, and the rim of the well. The area was dubbed the Blasted Heath, and the locals whispered about the strange occurrences that had taken place there. People avoided the area, and those who ventured near reported feeling a sense of unease. The plants and animals in the area were affected, and the water from the well was said to be tainted. Amy never returned to the farm, and the locals whispered about the horror that still lurked beneath the surface. As I worry about Amy's safety, I recall his encounters with the mysterious entity and its sinister influence. He's unable to leave, haunted by Nahum's final words. "Can't get away, draws ye. You know summat's common, but tain't no use." Amy's a kind old man. When the reservoir project begins, I'll alert the chief engineer to keep a close eye on him. I fear for his well-being, tormented by nightmares of him transformed into a twisted, brittle creature.